Hey everyone, Temporal here. And for this session, we are going to be responding to the thought that is often put out there of Roadhog isn't a tank. And he most certainly is, but we have a thread, and as usual, I like to use these threads to sort of inspire the discussion, allow us to cover a topic that generally needs to be covered, is a common thought out there in the community, to correct misinformation, as we put it. So we look at this one. I don't really. Anyways, whatever. So we look at this one and we see unpopular opinion. Roadhog is not a tank character. Hey, Cager, how you doing? So this is, of course, the usual way that people use unpopular opinion. They use unpopular opinion, and then they say something that's a popular opinion. In this case, it's wrong, but that's what happened. We can see this was 69% upvoted, so there's at least some people out there who went, no, that's not right. We're gonna fight it. And there's some comments out there that are good and correctly fighting it as well. And we'll look through some of that. But first, I'm going to read through the main post. It's not a long one. Then I'll give my thoughts. Then we'll get into what people said, and we'll further flesh out and explore their thoughts, as well as if you guys have comments. Okay. It's a very popular opinion. Absolutely. So, pretty much title, I see all these people saying they're playing Roadhog and they are doing their part with gold limbs and gold damage, but are they really playing the tank role? Who cares about gold limbs or gold damage for any role? Did you win the game? Full stop. Did you win the game? You're not going to lose SR if you win the game. That's how it works. So if you win, you're good. It's not about how much damage you do. It's not about how many limbs you get. It's not about being the best loser on your team because your team still lost. Like, it's about, did you win the game? Cool. I feel like it's the role that DPS pick when queues for damage are too long. Well, that much is true, but that doesn't make him not a tank. And Roadhog has so much damage potential with ult and one-shot combos with hook and long-range attacks that deal massive headshot damage. It's that sometimes he feels stronger than some DPS characters. I think it's a common complaint in Overwatch League and in high-level Overwatch that tanks have a disproportionate amount of impact on the match. That would generally be the consensus. That doesn't make an argument that he's a DPS character. That makes an argument that he's a tank. Now, the truth is, at a high level, people really don't think Roadhog is that good, mostly because he's not. If you're unfamiliar with how to handle him, if your team is unfamiliar with how to handle him, he can be trouble. I actually remember we ran into a 4,500 hog player that was like, okay, gotta teach a university team how to deal with the 4,500 hog, and it took them a good hour to figure it out, to solve it, to get the practice doing it. But once they had it, it completely shuts down the other team, because hey, hog is good when he's not adapted to, when he's not handled correctly, but the truth is, at the top levels, no, he can be pretty easily shut down. That said, an argument of, hey, he feels stronger than some DPS characters is an argument that he's a tank. You just don't realize it. Now, I know we're saying, oh, one-shot combos, but again, one-shot combos are not exclusively to the DPS class. Most people would consider one-shot combos to be Doomfist, Widow, Hanzo. Yeah, those are all one-shot combos. Hog, that's a one-shot combo. Zen's 5-orb, that's a one-shot combo. Wait, this is in the tank role. This is in the support role. Hog having a one-shot combo isn't really an argument that Hog is a DPS, unless Zen having a one-shot combo is an argument that Zen is a DPS. And some people would make that argument. They would say both Hog and Zen are both DPSs, not supports and tanks, but they would be wrong. I mean, that's just too shallow of an understanding of the game, of where you can get your value. By the same argument, is Sombra actually a support because she hacks health packs? I mean, I was cool with support Sombra. I was cool with... Support was released as a DPS hero, but I was cool when Lucio Sombra was a support combination that got run. But most people don't look at that. That's not how they think of it. They go, no, she's still a DPS hero. They might think she's a bad one, but she's still a DPS hero. Like, okay, well, if that's what we're looking at, and we're not going to say Zen's a DPS, or even if you do, if you say those two things, you'd sort of have to say, okay, well, maybe Sombra's a support. It just gets too messy. The reality is, you can't have intellectual honesty saying Hog is a DPS hero unless you're also saying Zen is a DPS hero. And, it's really funny that we're able to run compositions at a professional level that use Zen, DPS hero, with Brig, who in GOATS people claimed was a DPS hero, was played by a DPS. Oh wait, that's like that's like, you just must be running 4 DPS heroes and no supports. How can your comp work? Oh, clearly there's supports, and there's flexible ways to play the game, even with higher damage. That sort of thing. Like, you don't have to be Moira to be a support. In fact, when people play Mercy, the damage boost is a lot more interesting than the healing in terms of its impact on the match. The healing absolutely matters, but one of the things that the Mercy's healing, sure, some triage healing is good, sure, her ability to heal people up between fights is pretty good, but it's the damage boost at the high levels that is really helping you out. Again, it's damage that does a lot of this. Having damage, increasing damage, doesn't make Mercy a DPS. Doing damage himself doesn't make Zen a DPS. Sigma, having gold damage every bit as frequently as Roadhog does, doesn't make him a DPS. He's still a tank hero. So that doesn't really fit. Like, if the argument is, oh, one-shot combo, we have other roles that have a one-shot combo besides DPS. If it's that he has gold damage, Sigma's perfectly happy to have gold damage. Reinhardt is perfectly happy to have gold damage when he's properly supported. Like, that's not really a thing. Okay, feeling stronger than a DPS hero, that's an argument that he is a tank. Okay, let's not forget press E to heal back up to full with no downside. This is just a shallow understanding of the game. The downside to pressing E as Roadhog is you got your ult charge for your very weak Whole Hog ult, instead of your support getting their ult charge for Nano that they then fed to the Winston that you were paired with, or that they then fed to, or them getting the window that they again then get to use, or them getting the Valk that they get to use. The downside is that basically every support ult is better than, basically every ult in the game is better than Whole Hog. There's a couple hit scan ults that might challenge it for being worse, but basically the thing here is this is just a shallow understanding. The downside to take a breather really is that Roadhog's ult isn't very good. Am I the only one rolling my eyes when Roadhogs are like, I'm doing my tank part? What tank part specifically are we talking about here? Well, that's an excellent question. So I've already responded to this a fair amount, but I'm going to get into this. I'm doing my tank part. What tank part specifically are we talking about here? This comes from a misunderstanding of what a tank is and what a tank's job is. So, is it a tank's job? Well, who takes space? When we define tanks, we usually talk about taking space, holding space, things like that. Who takes space best? Well, tanks take space best, but, main tanks, Reinhardt can walk forward with his shield up. Cool, that's in a way to take space. A Winston can jump in past the opponents, turn opponents around. That takes space because now your backline can walk in. A Hammond can knock a team to the side so that they can't shoot at you while your team rotates, or so that they have a harder time shooting at you while you rotate across an opening. That takes space for your team. A Diva can booster herself up past behind a team and start shooting from an angle, which causes the team to turn and shoot at her, which then allows your team to rotate in more easily. A Sigma can sneak his way up through security and start shooting down that angle. And, oh, what? You're shooting security? We sort of want to back up, or we want to change our angle to answer that, which allows his team to push main more easily. But, Tracer can do these things too. Tracer can easily get behind a team to help them do that. A Bubble Doomfist can go in and slam a team the same way that Hammond might pile drive it, a Zarya plus Doomfist, and then his team can walk forward while that bubbled slam is happening. A Widow can activate infocytes and everyone runs for cover and her team is allowed to take space. So this taking space thing isn't strictly limited to the tank role. Okay, so there's something there. Well, what about this enforcing space? Well, we talk about, main tanks tend to be better at taking space, off tanks tend to be better at enforcing space, and there's some truth to that. Off tanks, a Winston can jump in and take the space, but a Diva can help the Winston hold it. A Ball might go in and take space, but then the Sigma sort of marches his Brig and his Zen in, walks in with them, and helps enforce it. Or they go take that space aggressively with the Hammond, and then the Sigma slides up to the off angle to hold the off angle that doesn't let the opponents take that space back once the Hammond has to leave, because Hammond is out of his cooldowns because he's a very cooldown-based hero. Okay, so there's something there in terms of tanks can do that, but, enforcing space, like, a Hanzo can enforce space. If you go get space and your Hanzo goes and takes that then gotten space, Hanzo can enforce it. Soldier can enforce it. Walking through a McCree holding a tunnel, that's pretty hard to do. He's got flash, fan, that sort of thing. Walking through a Brig holding a tunnel, when there's a Zen behind them, that's pretty darn hard to do too. I don't really think this is exclusively the area of tanks, actually. I think this enforcing space is damage enforces space pretty well, and every role in Overwatch can do damage, which enforces space. So off-tanks might be a little better at it. It's certainly harder to remove a Sigma, harder to remove a Hog than it is to remove, say, a Zen that's trying to enforce space, or to remove, say, a Mercy. Mercy's not going to enforce space very well, especially by herself. But like everyone can enforce space to some degree. It's just a question of which. Okay, so it's not about the one-shot potential that makes something a DPS or a tank. Maybe it's about taking space, but like we talked about, Tracer, Doomfist, they can take space. Sombra obviously can take space invisibly. Maybe that doesn't for a team, but she can do it. Then we get into sorry, we covered one-shot capability, damage done. None of those are what being a tank is about. We covered taking space, and there was something there that was a little more tank, but there were definitely DPS heroes that could do it. Then we got into, okay, well, what can we do with enforcing space? And everyone pretty clearly enforces space. We could keep going, but I think we're going to struggle to be like, oh, well, what really defines being a tank here? Well, what defines being a tank here is being able to not get one shot when you walk around a corner. And I'm serious. That is the answer. So like a Tracer can blink her way past, get behind a team, turn them around. A Sombra can do the same thing. If you put a High Noon somehow behind the opposing team, they'd turn for it. Your team could go in. Infocytes does it. But what really makes a tank, like from a design perspective, is they can potentially walk into past a corner that you're not sure if it's threatened or not by the enemy team. They can potentially walk through it and not immediately get one shot. At least not immediately get one shot by one hero. That is what defines a tank. That's what does it. That's really what does it. They have a big enough health pool that they're less likely. They're the heroes that you would choose to walk into fire and potentially not get one shot if you're wrong about it. You don't think it's held by an enemy sight line, but it actually is. That sort of thing. Like, that is actually what does it in terms of making a tank there. So, like, oh, Roadhog has 600 HP. Roadhog is definitely a tank. Sorry. That's how it works. Because again, we've established other roles can go do these things. So that's like, wait, if other roles can go do these things, okay, that's going to have to be a thing where it can't strictly be, oh, well, only tanks can make space, because we know that's nonsense. Tanks do generally do the best job of making space as a role. Everyone does a good job of enforcing space. Even the off-tanks are better at taking space than most DPS, but there's exceptions for some of those highly mobile or highly survivable DPS. I mean, Mei's Ice Wall is great for taking space, for example. So it really is mostly the ability to round a corner and not instantly get one shot. And the reason for that is if you can round a corner and not instantly get one shot, you have the potential to go, okay, we can potentially open things up. If we're having to break a defense, we can potentially threaten. If we send a Reinhardt here, it's very easy to understand. Our Reinhardt walks out here, has a shield, definitely isn't going to get one shot, is going to walk forward, team is going to walk behind it, team can walk with him. Okay, that works. We're able to break this corner that our team was hiding behind against this enemy team and not just instantly get one shot and not just feed. So that makes sense. Again, same thing with a Winston. A Winston jumps back here, drops his bubble, turns them around, fine, whatever. And that happening turns enough attention that now we feel we can peak this with squishies. A Roadhog might go, hey, I'm going to walk up this path over here, and a Sigma would do much the same thing, and I'm going to hook or threaten to hook, and that has to turn attention. But I don't get blown up if as Roadhog, I mean, I can if 6 people pay attention to me, and none of my teammates go threaten when 6 people pay attention to me. I absolutely can get blown up as Roadhog here, but this is how Roadhog makes space. He walks up over here and goes, hey, I'm going to try to hook you or threaten to hook you guys from here. When you turn your attention to me, now you guys get to go over here and threaten them, and I have 600 HP, so I didn't get one shot, and Breather, that's another 300 HP plus damage mitigation while it's going on to potentially retreat with. Now, this is the better way to play Roadhog in most situations like this, go threaten a flank and off angle, this sort of thing, but there's other ways to play Roadhog. You could play Roadhog at the choke and peek the choke with Roadhog and go try to hook something and just go fishing until you get something. Oh, didn't get it? Use Breather, go back behind the choke. Go out again. Oh, didn't quite get it. Use breather, go back behind the choke. Got him this time, bring him in. Team eliminates him. If you're really good, you turn him around, drop him behind you. Go back, use your breather to recover, and now you're down your cooldowns, but they're down a person, and you walk forward again with your big belly protecting your team, taking a couple hits as your team walks in, and you don't instantly get one shot, and even if you do get eliminated, well, your cooldowns were on cooldown for a moment. Hopefully your team trades something back there, whatever, or you can wait for your cooldowns to be back depending on the distance of the enemy spawn before you go do that push. But Roadhog has ways to very significantly help break chokes. That's not saying he can do it by himself. If Roadhog tries to just do this peeking repeatedly at Hanamura, he's going to get blown up because 6 people are going to shoot at him. Don't get me wrong. That's how it works. But what if he had a Zarya bubble to help him do it? What if he had a Rhine shield to help him do it? Oh, that becomes a little bit more viable. Now, obviously, at a Hanamura choke, what he'd really do is he might use a Rhine shield. Rhine steps forward to swing, and he goes, yep, that was enough of an excuse for me to run through right side, get cover over here, and now he's lurking over here. That would be a better Roadhog thing. But Roadhog has 2 ways that he can go significantly try to help break chokes and not get one shot. Does that mean he can just go into chokes and be like, you can't take me down? No, 600 HP is a lot of HP compared to Tracer's 150, compared to Hanzo or McCree's 200 or 225. If those heroes tried to do this, and you guys might be thinking, well, that's not real. Like, if he steps into the choke and hooks someone in to try to start a push or whatever, that's not real. Like, Hanzo and McCree can step into this choke and take shots and start to try to put we'll use Hanzo because he can one-shot like Hog can here. Like, Hanzo can do that. Yeah, Hanzo can. But Hanzo can't. If Hanzo's wrong when he peeks a corner and someone's holding it, Hanzo is much, much more likely to get eliminated than Roadhog or Sigma or an Orisa. Like, that's how that works, and that's what makes the characters different and the roles different. Literally, the tanks are there to be fat DPS, but to be fat DPS that specifically assist in making pushes happen because they can potentially peek an opposing defensive position and not immediately get punished for it. Now, at high-level play, they will still very quickly get punished. If you're Hog and you try to peek and you're like, oh, it's fine, but you peek while a sonic arrow is up, and then you get storm arrowed as soon as you peek and you've rooted yourself with your hook, and then you get halted to get held there, yeah, you're going to get eliminated before you get back, and that's going to happen, and that sucks, but at that point, why didn't you have a tick of defense matrix over you? At that point, while they threw 6 people through cooldowns at you, why was your Hanzo from window not shooting them from an angle and taking them out, that sort of thing? Like, yeah, they can do that. They can do it a lot better. They're still not perfect. It's like sending someone out. It's like, pretend you're in a military situation. It's like, okay, we've got the guy we've got 1 bulletproof vest. That doesn't mean he's invincible, but it means if the bullet hits specific places, he's more likely to survive. If you're a team of 4 and 1 person has a bulletproof vest, the guy with the bulletproof vest is probably the person you want to draw the initial attention. Right? There shouldn't be a huge thing of like he's 1v4ing the other guys, like, oh yeah, go do that thing. No. And he's not invincible, but that bulletproof vest, like, he's got a better chance of surviving for just a second or 2. So if we can do hey, we all want to open angles, we all want to threaten from different sides, but he's the one who should shoot first or walk through the doorway first or whatever the course may be. He's the one that you're going, if anyone's going to take attention, we don't want you to get shot at. But it makes the most sense for it to be you. But that does not mean that you can actually tank massive amounts of damage. You just help us break the corner, break the choke, pull opponents' attention for a minute advantage there. That is actually how this works. And Roadhog 100% fills this role. What most people just get salty about when they're complaining about this Reinhardt thing is they don't like that he's doing too much self-healing and he's feeding too much. That's less of an issue since he feeds less ult charge now to damaging enemies. They don't like that he's got gold damage, which, okay, yeah, that can happen because he's just feeding and he's not actually getting eliminations out of it, and that actually is bad, but sometimes it also just means that other people aren't doing their jobs very well, or no one's playing as whatsoever as a team, so he's just freelancing, and he's better at freelancing than most heroes. Other good freelancers would be Soldier, Tracer, those sorts of heroes, yeah, absolutely. That's a thing that happens, but he will work a little better in a freelancing situation, or they're in a situation where they want Reinhardt. And people wanting Reinhardt is a way to, get tanks to stop queuing, basically. because all of the lower ranks constantly want their Reinhardt, and, always playing Reinhardt isn't the most interesting thing. One of the best things you can do is figure out, if you're not a tank player, is figure out how to play consistently when you don't have a Reinhardt. Because I promise you, the other tanks work, and while some people play Hog terribly, many people will also play Reinhardt terribly. So, like, you don't want to be going, oh, I don't know how to play when there isn't this, or I don't know what makes us win or lose games when we don't have a Reinhardt. You want to work on that. Okay. That's kind of my thoughts on the matter. That might be a little bit controversial. It really shouldn't be, but it might be. So I'm going to go ahead and catch up on chat a bit here, and then we'll get into the comments. I might do less than full catch up on chat because I think we're going to have some interesting comments. I'm a day or 2 days late to this post, so comments have had a chance to get to the top, this sort of thing. Like, Hog is a tank, but his playstyle discourages people from actually playing him like a tank. This is meaningless. This is a meaningless post right here. Like, Hog is a tank, but his playstyle discourages people from actually playing him like a tank. What does that mean? What do you mean by this? And everyone's upvoting it because they're like, yeah, that sounds right. That sounds right. It's non-committal on what it actually means or anything, but that's right. Like, that's the smart thing to say right there. No, I'm sorry, but, like, this doesn't say anything. I am going to downvote this because this legitimately does not say anything. Discourages from actually playing him like a tank. What does playing him like a tank mean? Do we not like that good hogs go up on off angles and threaten from the side with their hook and then retreat with breather and that sort of thing? Because that actually is the right way to play him. Like, that is a better way to play him than I'm going to peek choke and go hook. Now, if you're getting Zarya bubbles, if you have a Rhine shield, you can sometimes justify this style a little bit more, especially if you're like, we're going to take a shield break war or something like that. Now, that's really an ancient way to play the game at this point. It's not terrible to do this. The more recent way to do this is the Zarya Hog situation. Bubble Hog goes fishing. But even that it wasn't a good comp. So I suspect what is being said here is he's a tank because of his health pool, but his playstyle discourages people from playing him on the front line. Ball doesn't play on the front line. Winston can play on the front line, but in a lot of comps doesn't. Sigma shouldn't be playing on the front line, though I know a lot of people put him on the front line. Like, being a tank is not about being on the front line. That's not what it is. Better divas don't play on the front line that often. They play on angles, on high ground, that sort of thing. Like, no. Okay, let me do a little bit of temporal downvoted just to make it 420. Maybe. Okay, so let me do a little bit of chat catch up. Yay, discussion video, nice. Rule, but I have gold damage would make more sense in competition for medals was shared between both teams. Okay. Rhine Pin? Oh yeah, Rhine Pin. One shot belonging to the tank class. There you go. Hog is good when sneaky, invincible, and protected by situational blindness. Oh, so always. Always on ladder is what you're talking about. Wait, how did you guys deal with the Hog at a 4,500 level with Sigma? No, what happened is we were playing as a Zen ball comp, and we were practicing our Zen ball comp, and we were playing into a team, and this was a sneaky move that they had. What they did is they played themselves like you'd really call it like a bunker comp, but what they actually did is they would play Hog plus Sigma, and they'd play it like a bunker comp, but by a bunker comp, I mean a double shield comp, where their Hog is either going to stay with their team or their Hog is going to separate, but separate in such a way that he can still be protected by his core. And what you have to do is you have to basically surround this team. So let's do this because it's fun. Here, I'll pull up Stat Banana. For those of you that are listening to these, because usually you can just listen to these, I apologize, but this is a good question, so I'm going to actually go ahead and answer it, and it's just so much better. I'll try to talk through what I'm doing, but this does work so much better with a Stat Banana here, which we have pulled up. So let's go like this, and maybe we'll get ourselves a Zen, and we're going to need a Zen for the other side as well as the Brig for the other side, the Ball for the blue team. Let's get ourselves... Sigma's fine for that team. Sigma's actually fine for both teams. Give me just a second. And then I need some, I have tanks and supports on both sides, so I need DPS. And we will go ahead and say, hey, let's give the, where's my tracers? Where is tracer on my stat banana? I should probably save presets. Okay, so let's give a tracer there, and maybe we'll get a, I don't really care. We can have a Sombra there, that's fine, just to make this more heavily dive. And then we'll give the other team something along the lines of, say, McCree plus, this can be done in a number of ways, but let's give it McCree plus, do I want to give it a tracer? Yeah, no, let's give it McCree plus Hanzo in this case. Okay, so if we're looking at this, we have a team that is set up in such a way that they are basically trying to do this. They're going, hey, we're going to set up with two stations that you can fire from, and this is the correct way to play double shield, where you're going to set up split in some way. You might split and go, hey, let's put our McCree with our hog, something like that, but they're going to be split in some way. Their hog's going to be doing some level of freelancing, and the rest of this is a bunker. And if you don't believe it's a bunker, if this then ball team swapped to a brawl team, this Roadhog would swap himself over to a Rhino, over to an Orisa, and then suddenly you're playing into a more true bunker, poke beats brawl, that sort of thing. So the idea here, and what this team did, and I won't say who they are, because maybe they still need to hide this strategy. But the concept here effectively becomes, hey, we are going to be a situation where if you dive us, we've got 2 stuns, maybe 3 stuns, whatever. In fact, let's actually, yeah, we'll keep that. I don't remember exactly what the support line was, but it doesn't matter. Where if you dive this, there's a Roadhog that your team doesn't like. There's a potentially a McCree. There's a Brig. There's enough here that you don't like if you dive them. And there's also the potential of them to go, hey, if you don't dive us, we're going to wander around, get picks with our hog. We're going to poke you with our Sigma, with our poke DPS, with potentially our Zen. Maybe it was an Ana. It doesn't really matter. That's the point. So what you have to do is you have to take your angles around this team as a dive team and go, hey, we're going to threaten it. But you can't actually take your angles around the bunker. You need to, just like you would against a different double shield cup, you actually need to first either force the hog to retreat to his team or force the hog to spend cooldowns, at which point he's going to start to run back to his team. You continue to adjust, and you might have to use some cooldowns to do this, but you're still, after you've forced the hog back to his team or forced out his major cooldown, his hook, because that's the thing. This is a bunker, but it's not a bunker you can instantly dive. Usually as a dive comp, if you can establish 3 good differentiated enough angles around a bunker, it's time to dive that bunker and you will win. Even if they have lamps, even if they have a Brig, even if they're set up as, but here, I'll make this, you know what, let's ditch this, let's ditch the Zen and go ahead and make them a BAP just to make this harder. If this team does not have hook, if this team right here is diveable without softening them up, you don't have to get lamp out, you don't have to get rock out, you don't have to make sure that they don't have bash or anything like that, you don't have to get them down to an average of 80% HP. If you have 3 good angles, you can dive this team. Now we've said it with 4 angles. You can dive this team and win, and you will win, and it's great. That's perfectly fine. You will win this. When this hog is here, you can still potentially win it like this, but when this hog is separated, it actually becomes a little bit harder. He's fishing, doing that sort of thing. So this becomes an exercise in weakening this hog to the point, forcing this hog, baiting that hook, pressuring him to the point at which he has to spend it, getting that out there. He'll run back to his team, and now you might need to quickly readjust after having pressured this hog, but you quickly readjust and then you hit your dive. And if you hit your dive, you will win. You will beat them in the brawl that you've now forced with what is effectively a bunker comp. The bunker is hardened enough while the hog is available. The bunker, can go, hey, we're going to threaten hooks, we're going to do that sort of thing, and a 4500 hog doesn't miss hooks. Now, obviously, there's some variance to that. People have good days and bad days, but this hog was feeling particularly hot and very, very hard for them to miss hooks, this sort of thing. So what you had to do was you had to go, hey, we're putting a lot of pressure on you doing this, whatever. Obviously, we're still going to be able to make you miss some hooks, but you're not missing very many hooks. We get you to force out that hook, fine, whatever. We get that hook out, and then this has to be dove, and heroes that are not Hog have to be eliminated. Hog is bait. If you dive Hog while he has the breather, while he has all that HP, that's bait. You need to accept that you're going to try to take a Hanzo off the board, a Brig off the board, a McCree off the board, two or three other heroes off the board, generally two heroes off the board, and then you're going to have to accept that he's going to throw out another hook, and he might get someone. You're going to try to stop him. Maybe you've got Diva to try to stop him, whatever, but you're going to try to stop him from getting value from that hook. But that is his explosive value, and you have to accept we can't dive Hog until we forced it. We can't dive the team until we forced out Hog's hook. After we forced out Hog's hook, we need to eliminate people that aren't Hog, and then we're going to have to deal with a second hook. And even if he gets someone and eliminates them at that point, now you're going to clean up and win the rest of the fight. Take another person off the board, whatever. After you've simplified the fight, sure, you can remove Hog. You're not going to have to deal with the second hook. But that is the way to deal with it. And it's a fun little tech. I mean, you swap between your Hog as a way to make it a little struggling for dive there. If you're playing against True Brawl, you swap your Hog to Orisa, and it becomes you guys would have to swap 6 heroes to try to punish our Hog Sigma comp. And but the right answer, of course, is to drive your dive comp better. Hope that answered your question, Kacher. Hope that answered the question for others of you as well. If you have more, let me know. Reaper is a tank, not so much. Soldiers the main healers, then Hog or DPS, Orisa is an off tank. I see. I want to know if Hog Orisa combo is still a thing. It's a thing. But the reality is Orisa Sigma is just better in most situations, and Orisa Diva can be better if you're dealing with dive. So it's like Orisa Hog still is useful. Going Halt Hook, that's still powerful. But the reality is Sigma can go off angle the same way I had Hog off angling here, but someone can go sit with him better. It's a much easier to send a McCree or a Zen or a Hanzo with your Sigma and have them get value by being with your Sigma, or have your Zen or whatever get value by being with your Sigma, than it is your Hanzo to get value by being with your Hog, that sort of thing. The protection that is sort of enabled there, the ability to take advantage of Sigma's shield and see through it, as opposed to, hey, Hog, your body is sort of a shield, but I can't really see through it. Sigma's better for that sort of thing. And the better way to play bunker-ish type comps is to be splitting your tanks, be splitting and playing in two different groups at least there. Temporal's definition as always makes more sense. Glad you like it, Celeste. Also, quick question, what kind of wins are worth to review? I'm on like a game 14 of win streak on your Zen right now, but I still want to get advice of playstyle. Sorry for the off-topic question. If you're on that heavy of a win streak, I might recommend waiting until you hit a loss, because what you're doing is sort of working. Obviously, I'll be able to tell you what to work on if you submit a review, but submit a review preferably where you aren't steamrolling them. And the reason I'm going to say that isn't because I can't find stuff for you to work on when you're steamrolling them. It's because you can't help but be more defensive, or more like, oh, well, if they'd actually resisted appropriately, I'd have done that. You know, I was getting a little full of myself. I was riding a little high, and you're going to start mentally protecting yourself, and then feedback isn't as useful. Wait, is Bastion a tank? He can't be one-shot even by Widow? Not really, because the threshold for him is so small. Like, even if he can't be one-shot, he's so close to being one-shot. This epic pentagram is a lot, even by temporal standards. Fair. Magdalena says, I take Hog over Rhine any day. Hug is usually the throw tank. Ryan leaves voice chat. Ryan switches dog. The game ends in an L. Sure, there is something to that. But that's not really the character's fault. That's, this is what you do when everyone is going to play independently, or you've decided you can't get value from your team. Like, here's the thing. Back before 2-2-2 lock, it was correct. If 4 of your teammates locked DPS, it was correct for the tank to go, I guess I'm playing Hog. This is before Ball existed. And the support to go, I guess I'm playing Zed. Like, this was actually the correct way to do it in the support and tank role. If 4 other people on your team lock DPS, where you just sort of went, okay, we're playing a very freelance heavy style, where you guys are on Tracer and Soldier and Sombra, and okay, we're playing a freelance style. Maybe you're on Reaper or something with self-sustained. That's what we're going to do, a bit of an every man for himself type thing. And that's sort of a result of like your Ryan swapping to Hog. He's probably pulling the trigger too early, doing it when it doesn't make sense, that sort of thing, absolutely. But he's mostly decided at that point, wrongly or rightly, that hey, I need to just play this game independently. I need to not worry about what my allies are doing. You always need to worry about the timing of your allies, but I need to not expect my allies to follow up on plays or try to follow up on their plays because they're not making anything happen. I need to go do this, and it's going to be easier to freelance as Hog than Reinhardt. Maybe they're finding that they can't get to the opponents before their shield breaks, or they get to the opponent, swing at them twice, then expect to get healed up and just never get healed back up. Or they're waiting to push for their team, and their team is just constantly getting staggered, so they never really get a good push opportunity as Reinhardt. So they want to play Hog so that they can go fishing a little bit while they're waiting for their team and potentially get a pick. And even if they never have 6 people ready to push, if they can get a pick while waiting for 6 people, and now they have 5 people and the opponents have 5 people, now they can push, that sort of thing. Like there's reasons to do that aren't wild, for example. But I agree, in situations where the game is lost or felt lost, Reinhardt's do swap, tanks do swap to Roadhog. But guess what? Sometimes doing so does bring those games back. I've certainly done it. Hog Zen 40 PS, Fear Goats. Just freelance on Zen, no footsteps, trade your life for 2. Sure. The Jumbo quite liked floating behind the enemy team and getting 3 limbs and then transcendencing. He was doing that in a skill tier where he was much more mechanically skilled than people on his way up, but it's fine. Okay. Hog is a tank, but isn't played like a tank. This reminds me of Hog Zarya meta, where main tank were supposed to play Hog, and both main tank and off tank struggled with meta. Sure. And Hog was the main tank in that situation. He was the initiator. He was the one who received the Zarya bubble, if we used Real's way of thinking about the game. So he was the one that the resources were poured into. He was the one who made the threat that potentially made space, unlike Zarya. So yeah, he was the main tank in that situation. And we've seen that before. We've seen situations. I played some Hog because I was a main tank player, and Diva Hog was a occasional anti-dive comp that you'd pull out in specific places or when specific terrain allowed for it. There was a time where on Control Center now we open and everyone rushes White Room, but the opening on Control Center at one point was a Diva Hog opening where you're sort of threatening the U-turn. One tank's threatening White Room, one tank's threatening main, and if they push White Room tank pulls back, main tank goes in closer. If they push main tank backs out, White Room tank goes in further, which is the same as any double shield or any double off tank meta, any poke meta, but the terrain was particularly good for it on the opener there. Okay. Yeah, no. Hogs who brag about their healing, usually that's not a healer issue. That's a Hog is like way too happy to tap their E button. And they're constantly inting at poor times where they get out alive, but they are actually feeding a fair amount of ult charge to the opponents. They have gold damage and gold healing because they're constantly going in and getting out, but they're not going in or they're not threatening at good times. They're not actually getting enough picks. If they are getting enough picks, it can be fine, but they're constantly going in and out. And yes, you can have better uptime than the rest of your team, and that may cause you to have gold damage. But if you also have gold healing, well, that's going to be a bit of a problem because your ult sucks and the opposing team is getting better ults off of it. Less of a problem now since the ult charge from shooting at Hog has been nerfed a bit, but still a problem. Halton Dante as Hog is pain. Yes. Ana is sort of the worst enemy of Hog. Okay. Temporally is your favorite hero except for Winston? Ana? Yeah, Anna. Okay, let's get back to our comments here. So, here we are. So Hog is a tank, but his playstyle discourages from people who actually want to play him like a tank. Garbage comment. And attracts people who didn't really want tanking responsibilities in the first place. What are tanking I guess we're going to be a downvoting fairy today. What are tanking responsibilities? I think you guys just mean frontlining. And I don't particularly want my Hog to frontline. He can if he has a Zarya. He can if he has a Reinhardt, but I don't particularly want him to. I generally want my Hog to go threaten a different angle, threaten not the main lane. That's better, both for taking space, for getting picks. Like, that's just better. If your definition of tank is large health pool, then yeah, but can he even make space other than with frags? How do you think Winston makes space? Winston gets on their back line, and by threatening their back line, their front line goes, oh, hey, we don't like that, and turns around and walks back towards him. Or their front line crumbles to your team walking on them because their back line can't help them because their back line is fighting a Winston. Like, Winston makes space by threatening to 1v1 to eliminate, or by either Winston, one of Winston's ways to make space is by threatening to 1v1 a off-angled hit scan, a support in the backline, that sort of thing. Like, that's one of the ways that he makes space. If threatening the 1v1 that he can potentially win and eliminate them on, that's less true with some of the hit scan, is his way of making space, then Hog doing it faster and more explosively isn't like worse. I mean, it's sort of worse in the sense of, hey, they're not distracted as long. Your team's window to, sort of recognize and push is maybe worse, except that Winston sort of needs his team to push and do those things to help him, whereas Hog, it becomes very obvious of the person's eliminated. The person is actually eliminated. We can clearly push guys, and if he didn't get the elimination, the back line or the front line is still turning to pay attention to him to help force him out, to help make him leave, and then it's easy for the rest of your front line to push into their turned around front line. Like, mind-boggling. Mind-boggling. Same thing with how Hammond works there, for example. Zarya, Sigma, and D.Va all struggle to spear to push too. That's why they're considered off tanks. They have very little initiation capability. I would argue that D.Va and Hog have more initiation capability than Zarya and Sigma, truth be told. But that's okay. Over 400 upvotes on that comment, right, Starfield? And taking and defending space is always about damage or the threat thereof. People think that making space is about defensive capabilities like shields or DM, but it's not. What a shield does is create angles where the enemy cannot deal damage, or healing in some cases, to those behind it, meaning they may have to put themselves in riskier positions to do so. Yup. Meanwhile, the players behind the shield can output damage just fine. Heck, the whole point of Ryan Shield isn't even to stand behind it doing damage. It's for Ryan to get close enough to swing his 85 damage per swing hammer. Thank you. And Diva peeling with the DM buys time to deal enough damage to an attacker to eliminate them or force them away. Right. I love the invincible Widow peek. The Widow is having a Widow duel, peeks, gets a tick of DM, and goes, yeah, it's not fair. You thought you could shoot me, but I'm in DM as I'm taking a Widow duel. Like, yes, absolutely. Here's the difference between Roadhog and Widow/Genji. It's very difficult to clear Roadhog out of his poke angle. He can hold down an entire lane by himself. Widow and Genji can certainly make space and force positioning, but they cannot soak enemy resources and live to tell the tale, especially Widow. Genji does have deflect, yeah. I'd have said the same thing there, though Widow can be harder to clear because of distance. Roadhog can't get frags so far away, but he puts fear into anyone in a 20-meter radius on a cooldown, yes. But yeah, this is a good post. This should have 400 upvotes. Okay. Oh, the OP got downvoted. Ooh, what did the OP say that got downvoted? So how would you play with Roadhog to be an actual tank? Because most shield characters counter his hook power, which is a very important part of his kit. So I feel like his place isn't in the front unless they hook Unless they make Hook work through shields like a milli punch. Oh, you got downvoted because you even suggested the idea of Hook working through shields. Like, Sigma isn't supposed to play in the front line either, Jagazor. That is the key here. Sigma isn't supposed to play in the same. If you put Sigma and Hog in most of the same positions, you can actually think of them as very similar heroes, but Hog is a little better at taking and explosively dealing with stuff from his angle. Sigma is a little better at keeping his angle and sustaining it and being harder to remove. Once Hog has spent his hook, it's pretty easy to shoot at him, force him to use breather and retreat. It's harder to make Sigma leave, but Sigma does not have the explosive elimination power. He will, however, still happily get gold damage, if that's what we're going to call it, by just pelting people from his off-angled lane. This comment is restoring Timberwolves' faith in the community. Ah! This is a dumpster fire, right? This is pretty much it. Every other off tank in the game has some form of ability to help the rest of your team, and Hog is just self-sufficient. What do you think Hammond is? Hammond is like... Are you going to be like, no, Hammond has peel against six-man. Hammond rolls through his own team to break the six-man dive. That's true. That's true. That's a thing that happens. Hog sometimes hooks Winston, so Winston isn't on your team. Oh, I guess Hog has peel. Like, okay. I'm good with it. Like, he can absolutely hold and take space into certain comps and does particularly well when the meta isn't databased, sure. The reason he doesn't feel like a tank in lower elos is the same reason Bulk, so we're making that comparison, might not feel like a tank. A tank, the space they make isn't immediately obvious like a Rhine, for example. And it's more difficult to recognize when you should engage based on those tanks. Yeah, that is the issue. The issue that people run into is the way people want to play the game, again, I've been over this, is they want two Reinhardts that hold up shields, and they want the other team to shoot at their Reinhardt shield while they shoot at people around the shields. Or they, even worse, want to, like, have both teams shoot at the Rhine shield and get into a shield war, which has just not been a thing for about 4 years. It's wild that people want the game to be played this way. They don't actually want to brawl. They don't want like the Reinhardt swinging at each other, things like that. They want like this whatever. I got nothing. I got nothing. It's painful. It's painful. Okay. But sorry, where I was going with this is Reinhardt is slower. Reinhardt's push is more obvious. Reinhardt walks forward with his shield up to get to the enemies to swing at them, and even if they're playing Reinhardt correctly and they're using their shield to get to enemies, that they can swing their 85 damage per swing hammer into them, which is great. It's more obvious when Reinhardt is pushing. It's more obvious. You have a little more time to react to, oh, my Reinhardt is walking in. Oh, my Reinhardt is in. I can open the angle and shoot. Now, the truth is, you probably should have been using this time. You probably should have taken a good position. You didn't, but you're at least able to contribute something while this happens. When a Winston does his thing, when a Hammond does his thing, when a Roadhog does his thing, unless the Roadhog gets a pick, instead of having like 4 seconds during which Reinhardt is pushing and you can sort of like realize it and go, oh, I'm supposed to do this. And if you're late, well, my Reinhardt shield just got taxed while we weren't shooting the enemy, which sucks, by the way. But is less obvious immediately than, oh, hey, my Winston was in and out in 2 seconds because the entire enemy team turned to deal with him, so he had to leap out. And, well, what was I supposed to do? That was only 2 seconds. Well, you were supposed to see that your Winston had snuck up, had used a previous leap to get high ground, had stabilized up there, was clearly waiting 2-3 seconds to get his leap cooldown back before dropping onto the opponents and go. But you just didn't realize it because you only understand how Reinhardt engages or maybe how Orisa engages. It's that it's more explosive and more explosive. This just gives more room to feel like you're doing something. The truth is you were losing in the 2 seconds that your Reinhardt was advancing and you weren't contributing. You were losing the fight. It's just less obvious because you still while Reinhardt was advancing for the later half of it, you still got to peek and do damage, so you felt like you got to contribute something during the fight, whereas Winston, you were just as useless, but you actually contributed nothing because the entire fight length was 2 seconds. But Winston's distraction was more powerful than Reinhardt's distraction. If you'd been paying attention for those 2 seconds, it was harder for the opponents to pay attention to you than it was for them to pay attention to you while your Reinhardt was advancing, truth be told. What's the point of Rhine Temporal? Again, to break Rhine, like the other tanks, we talked about this with Roadhog. You have an opposing corner, you have a corner, and your Reinhardt can walk past that corner, and he's got a lot of health, a lot of armor, and he's also got a shield, so he's not instantly gonna get deleted. Like Reinhardt is something that helps your team rotate. He helps himself rotate onto enemies to do damage, but he can walk through a defended corner, a defended choke, and unlike Reaper, not get instantly deleted. And I went with Reaper there because Reaper has a shorter range similar to Reinhardt. A Reaper, if he peeks the corner, can instantly get deleted. Reinhardt can put his shield up, can be like, oh, I took too much damage, let me go back and get healed up, and then let's go find a different place to try. But if you have to be like, that's a blind corner, we don't know what's around it, do you want your Reaper to peek that corner, or do you want your Reinhardt to peek that corner? You want your Reinhardt to peek that corner. Okay. Compete with hook, ball is much easier to see. Slam, setting up easy shots, like Erisipol, grapple. You don't need slam to set up Erisipol, but okay. Or are you saying slam sets up easy shots like Erisipol does? That's probably what you mean. Hug is a tank because the threat and reality of hook can zone people. That's also why Widowmaker is a tank. Who are you quoting here? Hog is a tank because the threat and reality of hook can zone people. A hog on a flank needs to be addressed just like a ball on a flank does. When peeking high ground, when peeking high ground, you have to respect his hook, just like you have to watch Diva for DM when peeking. That being said, he does all sorts of stuff worse than other tanks, so the leftover role for him is just damage dealer. I mean, he one-shots better than all the other tanks. He self-sustains better than all of the other tanks except Hammond. Arguable whether he or Sigma is the second best at self-sustaining. So no, he's not like, again, he's not great at the highest level of play, but he's a great ladder hero. Yeah, yeah. I think this is a little bit unfair, picking on this hog as a tank because the threat and reality of his hook can zone people. That's also why Widowmaker is a tank. Again, like I'm okay with this argument though. I am okay with using this as the counter argument because again, the real answer is he can like all damage, all threats of damage zone people. Everyone in the game enforces space because everyone in the game does damage. The real thing is, hey, he can potentially peek corners and not get one shot. So this is about enforcing space. Was Widow, you can't effectively hold your ground like Hog can, right? And yeah, holding your ground, that's kind of what we get into with all tanks, but the truth is DPS do that pretty well. DPS are pretty good at enforcing space. That's why the anti-goats meta of 4 DPS plus Ball or Orisa and Mercy, that was a quad DPS meta for breaking goats, that existed, and it would win the first fight against goats, and then it would just take huge amounts of space, like win the first fight on first point, and run up to just in front of the spawn point on second while one person pushes cart, because you want to take all that space for free against goats while goats is in spawn, because you can enforce it quite well with your DPS heroes. So like, yeah, taking it's harder, but you can enforce it quite well. So that's kind of how that works. Holding ground is actually pretty easy for most DPS, though yes, people like Sigma are even better at it. So that just means Hog is a 600 HP DPS. Welcome to the dark secret of what tanks are. High HP DPS. Usually they have a little bit, usually they pay for that in some way. DPS tend to be better at securing their finishes. They tend to either go, hey, they have the mobility and the consistency to finish their eliminations. Tanks tend to be missing one or both of those things. Roadhog, for example, does not have mobility. He's a bit of an exception because, yes, he can one-shot people. Reinhardt struggles a bit with mobility. Yes, has charge. Yes, has shield to get people, but struggles a little bit. Winston is going to generally be in a situation where when you get on someone and factoring in the self-healing, all that, there's reasons Winstons go to such lengths to make sure they get their jump pack damage and to wheelie meave. And it's because they're going to hit reload issues before they eliminate people. Once we factor in the standard amounts of self-healing from like an Ananade, from things like that, from a Lucio amp, they're going to struggle to actually eliminate people before it just becomes an silly amount of time if they don't get those extra bits of damage that are the melee weaving, the landing of the jump pack. Same thing with Ball. Ball can pretty easily get, we'll say 150 damage on a hero, hit them with a roll through fireball, hit them with a pile drive, but then they've got to get about 50 to 100 damage out of their weapon, and their weapon has huge spread almost instantly. And it's very easy to run out of ammo on that if it's not used well. That's why Balls start figuring out, wait, how can I get 2 fireball hits instead of 1 off of this tether? Or am I going to tether, pile drive, shoot you for a bit, and then finish you with my exit fireball? That sort of thing. The consistency to get that elimination on you either need the consistency of your damage or the mobility. You tend to be lacking one of those as a tank. And some of you might say, okay, well, Hanzo doesn't have great mobility. McCree doesn't have great mobility. And that's true, but McCree's very consistent at getting those eliminations with his, hey, you've got flashbang headshot. Hanzo, okay, well, sure, you don't have consistency when you're shooting from a million miles away, but once something's in your face, you're quite consistent with Storm Arrow to take things out, that sort of thing. Anyway, minor concept, doesn't really matter. But yes, tanks are basically fat DPS. That's how they're designed. They tried to make them pay for that in some places, but there's a reason a lot of people go, hey, these are the most impactful things on the game. Zarya got mobility and does a lot of damage. That's why she's the best tank. I don't think Zarya really has mobility. Okay. Okay, let's find a new top comment, because we're going to find another top comment here with huge upvotes, I'm sure. If you think about Hog, just wait till you break down Zarya. She does far more damage and can feed less, and she has bubble. I feel like it's the role that DPS pick. 100% at lower ranks, and higher ranks at Zarya. This is true. Can't make Zarya deal any damage. Get your bubbles right. Okay. This person... Okay, I was going to tell you how to get your bubbles right. Do we have another top level comment here? Okay, the problem comes when people play Roadhog like a DPS, essentially running from every single fight when the odds become slightly against them. No, they run from the fight because their hook is on cooldown. And if you look at Hog's power level, it starts very high when hook is off cooldown. When hook goes on cooldown, Hog's value drops to less than half. When Breather goes on cooldown, it drops even lower, of course. If he has to reload, it drops even lower, of course. But, Hog's value drops significantly, just like Hamster's value. If Hamster has pile drive and adaptive shield and tether on cooldown, Hamster isn't a very powerful hero. He can threaten some weapon damage. I'd actually argue Hog is the better hero if both of them have all their things on cooldown, because Hog's right clicks can still one-shot people. Left clicks can still one-shot people at point-blank range, so I'd say Hog is still the better hero. But, Hog's run because, hey, their powerful ability is on cooldown, and now they sort of want to stay out of the fight and right-click sniper or leave to go get healed by their support or pop breather out of sight and then come back in once hook is back up, that sort of thing. You're just wrong. It's not like, oh, the fight turned slightly against me, so I'm going to leave. Well, you should. I don't like pushing into fights. I don't like pushing into enemies when they have the advantage. I like falling back into defensive concaves. Roadhog, like every other tank, takes space and does it quite well. It takes a coordinated effort from the enemy to remove a good Roadhog from a flank position, sure. Road can easily win 2v1s, even with his terrible mobility, and that's what makes him so intimidating. The same mobility is why he's fairly easily countered by coordination. Just call him out and work with your team to stop him. I don't know that I agree that he easily wins 2v1s. No, you can bully Hog. If you find an isolated Hog and you gang up on him with, say, Tracer Sombra, he's not going to have an amazing time. Sigma Hanzo, he's not going to have an amazing time. You can overwhelm a Hog in a true 2v1 pretty easily. Hog's at his best when you're not paying attention to him or when you can't fully pay attention to him. If he has to do a 1v1, he's totally fine with it, but 2v1s, sure, sometimes he's still going to land his hook, he's going to get the elimination, turn it into a 1v1, he's going to breather to retreat, and then he's going to come back with a new hook and a full clip and be ready for a 1v1 again. But you're perfectly happy to fight a Hog in 2v1s and 3v1s. You might not fight him totally when he has his positioning. He's in a cave type thing, in a covered lane, that sort of thing, if you're on flankers. But generally speaking, 2v1s, you're happy to take that fight with Hog. Soaking damage, feeding red ult. That's what he does? Okay. Hmm. Here we go. Playing on the front line does not equal tank character. Hog makes space by going on a flank because either the enemy team deals with him by sending their whole team at him, by sending one or two at him, or by ignoring him. If they send their whole team at him, he can rotate. If they send her one or two, either he can win or stall that fight long enough for help, or if they say no one, he can pressure for free. I don't know that I call it. If you send no one to deal with Hog, you shouldn't pressure for free. You should line up the hook and just delete people. But okay. That's not to say Hog can't frontline. Sure, there are times when Hog needs to be in the front of the action, but his kit really encourages that kind of hit and run playstyle. He may have a lot of health and damage mitigation ability, but beyond using cover, he has no way to block incoming damage. So if you frontline with him, you're kind of feeding, or your team would rather have you on an off angle because either you go uncontested or the enemies have to send more than one against you. Right. If you're having Hog problems, try tackling these off angles as a team and force him to play with his team where he is less effective. Right. And that's what I was talking about in the demo. You pressure the enemy team or pressure Hog until Hog uses hook. That'll cause Hog to retreat back to his team, and if it doesn't, whatever, you dive his team anyways. And then you go, okay, force out the hook, then encircle the team and dive the team. But you have to encircle the team and dive the team before his hook is back up, obviously. Okay. Try sleeping his hooks, eating his hooks with D.Va, or bubbling his hooks as Zarya, and they don't mean, block the hook with DM. They mean the person that gets hooked, you then boost her over and DM on top of. Or bubbling his hooks with Zarya. Another good tip is punish his poor positioning when he is fishing with Orion and Lucio rush comp. Sure, just those two are enough to pop that bubble in no time at all. Just don't get hooked. Okay, that's a good one. I'm good with that. So there's actually some pretty good responses in here. Tank does not equal standing in front of your team waiting for things to happen. Support does not equal healers. DPS does not equal go eliminate stuff on your own. Good topic there as well. Okay. So we had some good responses to this. There were some terrible comments in here too. I don't like the most upvoted comment. I don't think this is a great post here in general. It's, of course, got the usual unpopular opinion while actually saying something that's quite popular. Fortunately, even though it has 256 upvotes, more than that, actually, it's only 69% upvoted. People did downvote it. So some of the community is like, wait, no, this is wrong, both in their downvotes and in some of the good comments that we did get here. So the community somewhat gets it, but the real answer for those of you that are like, well, what makes a tank? It's the big health pool. It really is. Now, I can definitely do the, hey, tanks take space, tanks enforce space, and there's truth to that, and what makes something a main tank versus an off tank. And if you ask me what makes something a main tank versus an off tank, I'm going to get more into the taking space versus enforcing space debate. But if you get into what's a tank versus a DPS, it's the bigger health pool. I can, again, get more complicated in terms of the consistency of finishing stuff off, which has to do a combination of availability of damage to take out a 200 HP hero and mobility. I could get into that, but the reality is the bigger thing by far is how much HP they have. It really is. Okay. Downvote is not a disagree button. That war has been lost, Mercedes. I know what you're saying. You're supposed to downvote bad stuff that doesn't contribute to the discussion, and upvote stuff that does contribute to the discussion, even if you disagree with it. But what is that? Like 10% of Reddit users that use that correctly? So like we can say what we want, but downvote's a disagree button. It's not supposed to be, but it is. Which is better in terms of usage and design, Zarya or Hog? For a long time, I used to think that Zarya's OP and Hog pure trash, but now I think the exact opposite. I mean, they're both great. Like, Roadhog is good on ladder, not amazing in organized play. Zarya is not that amazing on high-level organized play, but is better on higher-level ladder. So you sort of hit a sweet spot. Once you get good enough, you realize that D.Va and Sigma are the off-tanks. For most of ladder, Hog is, you can independent, you can freelance, it's cool, it works. As you get a bit higher, you get into Zarya, or as you get a bit better, you get into Zarya, because Zarya does so much to fix teammates' mistakes with a bubble. Teammates making mistakes kind of gives you good bubbles that makes you stronger. You do a ton of damage. You have higher uptime than Hog does. You don't have quite the one-shot potential, but you don't have the huge power drains either, because it's so easy. As people get good at this game, it's really not that hard to consistently maintain. 70 to 100 energy, 80 to 100 energy on Zarya. It's really not. And I don't mean that to like go, oh, you're bad if you can't. Like, I totally get it. It's hard for some people. But like, once you get moderately good, once you get good enough with Zarya, there's always, and I basically mean always, the tools there to get 70 to 100 energy for most of the match. And if you can do that, you're not going to have the burst potential of Roadhog, but you can do so much more damage than Roadhog as long as you're not constantly getting reset. So yeah, he sort of becomes I would say, yeah, Zarya is probably the better hero than Hog. I would say Zarya is the better hero than Hog. But D.Va and Sigma are actually the best off tanks for reason, for a good reason. And that has to do with, hey, not letting the enemies set up their win condition, having huge flexibility in what they can do, not letting the opponent solve the fight, giving your team more time to solve the fight is a pretty big deal. And off tank is one of the best roles for doing that. And these are the two best heroes in the role for doing it. Okay. We got it. 420 and 69 in one post. I think my don't play Rhine take is truly unpopular one. For metal ranks, it probably would be, yeah. Timberl wants to be the bronze of Reddit users. Ha! D.Va, greater than Sigma. Much, much, much greater than Zarya. Greater than Hog. Much, much, and then more, but not much, much, much. Greater than Monkey. No. I'd probably still consider Monkey better than Hog. Monkey has a couple maps where it can be a good choice for huge percentage of the player bases over Hammond, and Monkey also has the ability to be used in 6-man, which is a viable comp, as well as in some Ana-Monkey comps that do still, again, see plays on Gibraltars, Numbanis, things like that. So no, I think you're ranking Monkey too low there. Celeste says, I disagree with you about Zarya Temporal. Even A10 sometimes gets 20 to 40% average energy. Not very often. Those are terrible games for A10. I've worked with A10 before. Like, we were both on phase 2. This isn't a secret. A10 is quite a good Zarya. Yeah, I'm not going to claim that there's not terrible games where it just doesn't work out, but let's be honest, that sometimes happens when... Okay, so the situation where Zarya gets really low energy is when you're playing Zarya into a, like, Hanzo Widow comp, and really, come on, that's on you. Like, you shouldn't be on Zarya in that situation. If the opponents are playing Hanzo Widow, you can't really bubble stuff because there's not predictable incoming damage, it's instead really bursty damage like that. Doesn't really work, and it's damage that relies on its headshot multiplier, which your bubble, of course, doesn't have a headshot multiplier increaser. So, yes, there can be situations where Zarya can't get energy, but in those situations that Zarya can't get energy, like, Zarya really wasn't a good hero to be playing, and you knew that, and you shouldn't have been on Zarya. So, okay. Zarya doesn't struggle to get energy as Brawl into dive, as dive into anything. Like, yes, there are situations, and yes, please don't play Zarya in poke comps. She is not good at it. I'll take a criticism as mine as I hooked the ride into the well on Ilios before being yeeted after them by Lucio. Okay. Okay. Welcome to the dark secrets of what tanks are. Okay. I think we're going to go ahead and the community wants 2 runs on the team. Ouch. I think we're going to go ahead and call it there. If you guys enjoyed the content, please do drop a like. If you are regularly enjoying this type of content, consider subscribing, pressing that notification bell. The other way to get notifications, to see what topics I'm covering, to be able to go, hey, I want to know when Temporal's taking some controversial take on Roadhog and how he's used, or covering how Dive fights against Roadhog comps, or maybe I want to see how Temporal reviewing a guide or agree with him, disagree with him, pick as the brain of a former Contenders coach, all of that stuff. If you want to see what we're covering, best way to stay up to date is to join the Discord in the description below, and you can actually go down to get roles and react to become a watcher, in which case you'll get Discord pings only if you become a watcher, so I won't just spam you if you're not a watcher, and you'll then see what topic I'm covering, what rank we're covering, what's going on there, and if it's a video that you want to be here live to see. Okay, that's going to do it. Patreon when? Good question. Good question. Oh, you're ganging up on me with the Patreon when. Nice, nice. Okay, that's going to do it. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.